Nicole, a very good afternoon to you. Thank you so much for your time. So we're preparing to send back grades 7 and 12 on Monday. There's a great deal of worry, of course, about COVID-19, which affects the physical. But is it the right thing to do to send these children essentially back into this environment, given the stress that's come with this pandemic?
Tebekele, I don't know how to talk in terms of rights and wrongs, but I can tell you that there is an enormous amount of anxiety. I think that we cannot underestimate just how anxious children are feeling at the moment. Their worlds have been turned upside down. Many don't understand what is this virus, how is it going to affect them, and you know, a lot are worried about school that they've missed, time that they've missed, what's that going to mean? And I think that also we know that the school that they are returning to is not going to look how they left it. So I think there's an enormous amount of anxiety that really needs to be thought about and I think managed by parents and teachers as we kind of go back into school time.
You speak about managing anxiety. How do parents and schools do that?
I think there are two very important points. The first is children need to have access to information. Parents have to be sitting down with their kids regardless of their ages. I mean, I know you're talking about the older kids now returning to school, but at some stage, all the kids hopefully are going to be returning. So parents need to be having developmentally appropriate discussions with all their children about COVID and about how they can protect themselves. You know, all the simple things that we know, we take for granted that our children just pick up. It's very important to have those conversations. And I think also to just sit children down and have conversations around what are you worried about? What kinds of things are you thinking about? We can't underestimate how important and how calming those kinds of conversations are for children, not to be underestimated.
The ideal would, of course, Nicole, be to have each school have 1 or 2 counselors or more perhaps on duty to be able to deal with the emotional stress or emotional pressure, in fact, coming from this period. The reality, though, in South Africa is majority of schools are poor and they're unable to offer that service. So how do people who come from a teaching background and parents at home who are taking care of these young people manage those conversations? Where do you start is how I'd actually like to phrase that. Where do you start in having that chat with your child?
I think sometimes it can be simpler than people realize because you don't have to have all the answers. I would be armed with some basic information as a parent sitting down with my child, but you don't have to have all the answers. And I think sometimes what children need is a message that says, I'm here with you, I'm supporting you, I'm understanding that it's a very, very difficult time. And so I think that even to just start a conversation by saying, what are you worried about? Sometimes parents and teachers can put the ball in the child's court. So you don't have to be incredibly skilled. You don't have to be a psychologist or a counselor. I would say just take the time to communicate with your child, to ask the questions and find out what are they experiencing. There can be enormous comfort in knowing that we don't have answers. You know, we can't answer all the questions and we don't always know the right things to say. But if your child feels that you understand where they're coming from and that I think the message can be all of us are a bit anxious at the moment. This is a very hard time, but we can be in it together as opposed to children feeling isolated and alone, which is much more frightening.
But of course, both parents and the education department are going to have to do a lot of post-pandemic work as well with the children because between grades 7 and 12, you also have millions of children there and they will have to be seen to beyond this COVID-19 moment.
Absolutely. And unfortunately, I think a lot of the burden is going to fall on parents, given the lack of resources that we have. And I think that in some ways, parents are very stretched and stressed themselves. Nevertheless, I guess I would say to parents, calm yourselves, work out, you know, what you need to do to calm your own anxiety. And then it's going to be very important to have many, not just one, but many conversations with our children as we move forward, particularly because, you know, there's so much that is unknown. And I think that's particularly scary for children.
And how much free help is available out there, Nicole, for counselling and that sort of thing in South Africa, for children specifically?
You know, in fact, more than we'd realize. I mean, for example, as a Gauteng Association of Infant Mental Health, we put together a resource list which we can make available for you, those psychologists and counsellors that have made their time available pro bono to offer supportive kind of guidance to parents. I think more is available than we realise. I know that SADC have put many things in place, so there certainly are There have been resources put in place, but it's never enough. We know this. It's never enough to meet the need. But I do think parents should reach out for support where it's possible so that they can then in turn offer that kind of support to their children. I wouldn't underestimate just how challenging this time has been for children who've had their world turned upside down as we have as adults.
Nicole, thank you so much for a wonderful conversation. Before I let you go, I need help of my own from you. I have a sneaky feeling that I mispronounced your surname. Can you help me with that?
That I can help with. It's Nicole Kanan.
Oh, I got it right, Nicole Kanan. Thank you so much for speaking to us. I was quite worried that I'd butchered that one.